Autumn often reflected on the unpredictable nature of life. She had always envisioned love as a radiant force, a brilliant emotion that would fill her heart to overflowing. Never in her wildest dreams had she imagined her own story would unfold with such poignant twists. It wasn't as if her romantic path before Barry had been a barren wasteland. There had been dates, fleeting romances that sparked and then faded, leaving her with a sense of something missing. Perhaps, she mused, fate was carefully curating her experiences, preparing her for what she believed would be the pivotal encounter of her life. As the tapestry of her past began to unravel, however, Autumn realized that this main meeting had indeed changed everything, but in a way that was starkly different from the rosy expectations of a hopeful heart. It began on a rather unremarkable Tuesday. For 4 years, Autumn had been a dedicated member of a large construction company, her sharp intellect and drive propelling her forward. Her role as the chief sales specialist was both rewarding financially and demanding of her complete attention. She made it a habit to arrive early, allowing herself precious moments to meticulously review reports before the morning's general meeting. That particular Tuesday was no different. Autumn was settled at her desk, the soft glow of the monitor illuminating her focused expression, when a somewhat flustered man entered their department. He was of modest height, dressed in a suit that seemed to have seen better days, its lines slightly rumpled. He shuffled nervously through a folder clutched in his hands, a furrow in his brow betraying his unease. "Excuse me," he began, his voice a touch hesitant. "Is this the sales department? I was instructed to personally deliver documents concerning the Green Harbour project to the chief specialist." Autumn lifted her gaze from the screen and took in the sight of him. He appeared to be around 35, with a receding hairline that hinted at early baldness at the temples, simple framed glasses perched on his nose, and slightly stooped shoulders. Nothing about his appearance screamed remarkable, yet there was something in his eyes, a warm, earthy brown flecked with golden sparks, that prompted a gentle smile to grace Autumn's lips. "Yes, this is the sales department," she replied, her voice calm and professional. "I am Autumn Lance, chief specialist." She extended her hand in greeting. He seemed momentarily flustered, almost dropping the precious folder, before awkwardly shaking her hand. His palm, she noticed, was surprisingly warm and dry. "Barry Turner," he stammered, "engineer of design department. I apologize for the concern." At that moment, standing there in the bustling office, Autumn couldn't have possibly conceived that this somewhat ungainly man would one day become her husband. And little did she know that he, as it later transpired, had been observing her from afar for quite some time, captivated by her confident presentations at the general meetings, where she eloquently represented the sales department's achievements. Barry would later confess that he always made a point of positioning himself where he could see her, yet a veil of shyness had prevented him from ever initiating a conversation. The design department where he worked occupied the 4th floor, while sales was situated on the 3rd, resulting in their paths crossing infrequently. Barry's world revolved around the intricate technical calculations for new residential complexes. He meticulously developed communication schemes, drafted floor plans, and envisioned the external aesthetics of the buildings. A truly talented engineer, yet a man shrouded in a certain reserve. Autumn would later learn that promotions often bypassed him, although many successful projects owed their realization to his innovative ideas and precise calculations. Meanwhile, Autumn was the face of these projects, meeting with clients, delivering compelling presentations, and skillfully securing contracts. Autumn genuinely enjoyed her work. It offered her the opportunity to connect with people, to witness the tangible results of her efforts in the form of signed contracts and the steady growth of the company's profits. Her colleagues respected her professionalism, and the management consistently recognized her high performance. Following that initial, somewhat awkward encounter with Barry, their paths began to intersect more frequently. Barry found various reasons to venture down to the sales department, seeking clarifications on project details, presenting revised planning documents for upcoming presentations. Autumn couldn't help but notice his lingering, interested gazes, but she didn't assign much significance to them. After all, she had grown accustomed to a certain level of attention. A tall blonde woman with a confident air naturally drew the eye. Everything shifted, however, at the company's 15th anniversary corporate celebration. The event was held at a charming country club, complete with a sparkling pool and well-maintained tennis courts. The June day unfolded in warm sunshine, kissed by a gentle breeze that carried the delicate fragrance of blooming flower beds. Following the formal proceedings, the congratulatory speeches from the management, and the presentation of awards, the atmosphere relaxed into an informal revelry. Autumn found herself standing by the edge of the pool, a flute of champagne in her hand, watching as her colleagues gradually shed their professional facades, embracing the carefree setting. It was then that Barry approached her unexpectedly. He had changed out of his usual office attire into light-coloured trousers and a soft blue shirt that surprisingly accentuated the warmth of his eyes. "Nice place, isn't it?" His voice sounded different than it did in the office, calmer, more self-assured. "Yes," Autumn replied, a genuine smile touching her lips. "Very." "This is a wonderful idea, to have the corporate gathering out in the fresh air," Autumn remarked, the gentle breeze playing with strands of her blonde hair. As they strolled a short distance from the lively group, a comfortable silence settled between them, soon broken by the discovery of shared passions. Jazz music resonated deeply with both of them, and they found a mutual fascination with the history etched in the stones of old towns, nurturing a shared dream of someday wandering their charming streets. When Barry spoke of his architectural projects, a spark ignited within him, a fervent enthusiasm that captivated Autumn. In the structured environment of the office, he often seemed reserved, his movements and words measured, but here, under the vast expanse of the sky, a different facet of his personality emerged. He revealed himself to be erudite, possessing a sharp wit that occasionally surfaced, and a thoughtful listener, his attention fully engaged. Barry spoke with particular animation about his passion for modern architecture, his voice imbued with longing, as he described his aspiration to design a house in that style, characterized by expansive windows that invited the light and smooth, elegant lines. "I have an entire folder filled with sketches at home," he confessed, a genuine light illuminating his brown eyes. "Someday I will build such a house. By the sea. It absolutely must be by the sea." He painted a vivid picture with his words. To wake up to the soothing symphony of the waves and sip coffee on the terrace, watching the dawn paint the sky in hues of gold and rose. Autumn found herself genuinely moved by his vision. "That sounds absolutely wonderful," she breathed. Would you like to see my sketches?" he asked unexpectedly, a hint of vulnerability in his tone. "I would," she replied, a soft smile gracing her lips. And so began their quiet blossoming. Initially, their interactions were confined to shared lunches at a nearby cafe, their conversations revolving around work-related matters, a comfortable professional camaraderie developing. Gradually, however, their connection deepened, extending beyond the office walls into the precious hours of their weekends. They explored museums, wandered through vibrant exhibitions, and lost themselves in the captivating narratives of the theatre. Barry's courtship was marked by a gentle gallantry and an appealing unobtrusiveness. He never pressed Autumn, never attempted to rush their budding connection. There were no heavy expectations, no demanding pronouncements, just the simple pleasure of engaging conversation and shared experiences. Their first kiss unfolded 2 months into their evolving relationship. They were strolling through the evening park, the air still warm from the day's sun, a peaceful quiet enveloping them. Seated on a park bench, they were discussing something inconsequential, the mundane details of their days, when a sudden, pregnant pause descended. Barry looked at Autumn with an intensity she hadn't witnessed before. Slowly, deliberately, as if offering her an unspoken opportunity to retreat, he leaned in and gently pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was tender, reminiscent of the innocent awakenings of youth. At work, they maintained a discreet distance, careful not to overtly display their burgeoning romance. They arrived and departed separately, their interactions strictly professional. But, as the saying goes, love's subtle signs are difficult to conceal entirely. Gradually, their colleagues began to notice the lingering gazes that passed between them, the casual brushes of hands, the shared dinners that stretched beyond the workday. It was Meg from accounting, with her keen observational skills, who first voiced the unspoken. "Autumn," she said one afternoon during a lunch break, a knowing glint in her eye, "admit it, you're having a romance with that quiet engineer from the design department." "What on earth are you talking about?" Autumn feigned surprise, though a blush threatened to betray her. "Oh, come on," Meg chuckled. "I see the way you look at each other, and besides, this is the 3rd time this week you've had lunch together." Autumn chose not to deny the obvious, but she also wasn't ready to divulge the intimate details of their connection. However, in the close-knit environment of an office, rumours spread like wildfire. Soon, the entire office buzzed with the news of their relationship. The reactions were varied, a mixture of curiosity and outright bewilderment. "Autumn, are you serious?" Alice, Autumn's close friend from work, exclaimed, her brow furrowed, confused. "He's not exactly your type, is he? You've always gone for tall, athletic, successful guys and, well, you know." Yes, Autumn understood perfectly. Barry was not conventionally handsome. He possessed no athletic build, didn't drive a flashy car. He lived in a modest one-room apartment, inherited from his grandmother, dressed simply without any pretense of high fashion, had no discernible vices beyond a deep appreciation for good coffee, and didn't stand out at work with overt ambition. But there was an undeniable something about him. Sincerity, perhaps, was the key. He made no effort to appear more impressive than he was. He didn't try to present himself as a desirable catch, didn't boast about non-existent achievements, and carried no air of false confidence. He was simply himself, a little awkward perhaps, but undeniably genuine and honest. "He's not like everyone else." Autumn would quietly respond to the puzzled inquiries. "I feel real with him. There's no need to play the role of the successful business lady. I can just be myself." But her explanation often fell on deaf ears. Whispers followed her through the office corridors. What did she ever see in him? Maybe he's secretly rich and we just don't know. She could have done so much better. But within the quiet sanctuary of her own heart, Autumn knew she was simply happy. For the first time in a long time, she had found someone who valued her, not for her outward appearance or her professional status, but for the essence of who she was. As their relationship deepened, Autumn began to notice subtle yet significant changes in Barry. Initially, they were small things. A stylish haircut from a reputable salon, a few new shirts that actually flattered his slender frame. He began to smile more frequently, a genuine, unguarded smile that softened his features. Autumn had never explicitly asked him to change, had never hinted that she wished him to be someone other than who he was. These transformations seemed to stem from within, a quiet blossoming in the warmth of their connection. It wasn't Autumn who initiated these changes. Rather, Barry himself seemed driven by an inner yearning to become the best version of himself, for her, for them. Autumn fondly recalled the day they ventured into the optician's shop. She had playfully suggested he try on a pair of stylish frames that caught her eye. He had hesitated, a familiar wave of self-consciousness washing over him, but eventually he relented. The transformation was remarkable. The new glasses, with their modern lines, completely reshaped his face, adding a touch of expressiveness and intrigue that Autumn hadn't fully appreciated before. "They suit you incredibly well, Barry," she had exclaimed, her delight genuine. "Really?" he had murmured, a hint of embarrassment colouring his cheeks as he studied his reflection. "Not too provocative?" "No," she had assured him, her gaze soft. "Just perfect. They really emphasize your eyes." He purchased those frames and, later, a set of contact lenses for occasions when he desired a different look. Then came the subtle shift in his hairstyle, allowing it to grow a touch longer and artfully styled to subtly conceal the beginnings of his receding hairline. When he contemplated growing a beard, Autumn offered her unwavering support, and it proved to be an inspired decision. The neatly trimmed beard lent his face a newfound strength and cleverly softened the lines of his chin. With Autumn's gentle guidance, his wardrobe underwent a significant upgrade. The ill-fitting baggy suits and trousers that had once hung on his frame were replaced with clothes tailored to his build. Dark blue and charcoal grey suits took the place of his previous unremarkable attire, and high-quality leather shoes replaced his worn-out ones. For his birthday, Autumn had gifted him a sophisticated perfume. "You really shouldn't have spent so much on me," he had said, his tone touched with a mixture of gratitude and slight awkwardness. But Autumn had seen the genuine pleasure in his eyes as he inhaled the rich scent. Gone was the generic, inexpensive aftershave. Now, a refined aroma with hints of sandalwood, cardamom and mandarin peel extract lingered around him. Gradually, even his posture seemed to evolve. He began to stand taller, carrying himself with a newfound confidence. The habit of slumping and lowering his gaze during conversations slowly faded away. Barry started to meet the eyes of those he spoke with. His voice grew firmer, and he expressed his opinions more readily. These changes did not go unnoticed in the workplace. Colleagues would cast surprised glances as he walked down the corridor, and the women from other departments suddenly found reasons to visit the design team more frequently. "Autumn, is this your doing?" they would ask Autumn, their tone a mixture of curiosity and admiration. "Did you transform him like this?" "No," Autumn would reply honestly, a gentle smile playing on her lips. "He wanted to change himself. I was just there." It was the truth. Autumn had never dictated how Barry should look or how he should behave. It all stemmed from his own inner desire to be worthy of her, to be the partner he envisioned for their life together. And this quiet internal transformation touched Autumn deeply. Then came an unexpected professional breakthrough for Barry. He was appointed the deputy head of the design department. While undeniably deserved, his projects had always been marked by their ingenuity and innovative solutions. It was a promotion that had seemed perpetually unreachable. Suddenly, the management's eyes had been opened. "Can you believe it, Autumn?" Barry had recounted, his face radiating pure joy. "Mr. Henderson called me in and simply said, 'Turner, stop hiding behind everyone else. Starting Monday, you're my deputy.' I don't even know what to say." Autumn had embraced him tightly, feeling the joyous thrum of his heartbeat against her own. That evening, they celebrated his well-deserved promotion at a charming restaurant. Autumn watched, a quiet pride swelling within her as she interacted with the waiters with newfound ease, confidently ordered wine, and held his shoulders back with an air of quiet authority. This was no longer the somewhat awkward engineer she had met just a year prior. A confident, capable man sat across from her, and Autumn felt her love for him deepen with each passing moment. Their colleagues, however, remained even more bewildered by the transformation. "You are a miracle worker," Meg had exclaimed. "You turned that quiet little mouse into a real man, and landed him a career boost to boot." Such comments irked Autumn. Barry had never been a quiet mouse. He had always possessed talent and a unique perspective. He had simply lacked the confidence to present himself effectively. And his career advancement was a direct result of his own professionalism and tireless dedication. But Autumn simply smiled in response. "This is just the beginning," she had said enigmatically. "You'll see what he's truly capable of." And indeed it was just the beginning. The proposal had come during a romantic dinner at a rooftop restaurant, the city lights twinkling like scattered diamonds below. After a delicious dessert, Barry had grown suddenly serious, taking Autumn's hand in his. "Autumn," he had begun quietly, his gaze earnest, "I never thought I would meet a woman like you. You've changed my life, showed me what I could be. Beside you, I feel strong, capable of anything." He had then reached into his pocket and produced a small velvet box. "I want us to be together, always. Will you marry me?" The ring was simple yet elegant, a band of gold cradling a small, classic-cut diamond. Not extravagant, but certainly not inexpensive. It was perfectly them. Of course, Autumn had said yes. By then, they had been a couple for nearly 2 years, and she couldn't imagine her life without him. The news of their engagement was hardly a shock to their colleagues. They had seen the trajectory of Autumn and Barry's relationship and had been anticipating this happy announcement for some time. Autumn's parents greeted Barry with a polite reserve. "The most important thing is that you are happy, my dear," her mother had said. But Autumn had caught the flicker of doubt in her eyes. Her mother, with her aspirations for Autumn, had perhaps envisioned a more financially established, more outwardly impressive partner for her daughter. But Autumn's heart had made its choice, and she harboured no uncertainty. Barry's parents, on the other hand, embraced her with a warmth that melted any lingering apprehension. His mother, a kind-faced retired nurse, had enveloped Autumn in a tearful hug at their very first meeting. "Finally!" she had exclaimed, her voice thick with emotion. "Barry has found a truly worthy woman. I've worried so about him." His father, a man with the sturdy hands of a foreman, had offered a firm handshake and a welcoming smile. "Welcome to the family, Autumn. You've made our boy so happy." They had decided on a wedding that reflected their quiet intimacy. No grand, ostentatious celebrations with hundreds of unfamiliar faces. Just a simple registration at the registry office, witnessed by their closest family members, a handful of cherished friends, and a few supportive colleagues. When they were pronounced as husband and wife, a profound sense of calm settled over Autumn. There was no tremor of anxiety, no whisper of doubt, only a quiet joy and an unwavering certainty that she was precisely where she was meant to be. Afterward, they adjourned to a small, cosy restaurant. The atmosphere was warm and inviting, the food delicious, and the background music a gentle murmur. As the evening drew to a close, they returned to what was now their home. Barry had moved into Autumn's 2-room apartment in the modern building a month before the wedding, and they had lovingly transformed the space into a shared sanctuary. The apartment, already spacious and filled with natural light, had been further enhanced by their personal touches. They had chosen new, comfortable furniture for the bedroom and hung several of Barry's watercolour paintings, his artistic talent a quiet passion of his, throughout the apartment. It had gradually shed its impersonal feel and become truly theirs. That first evening as husband and wife, they popped open a bottle of champagne, retrieved a celebratory cake and the pizza they had ordered on their way home from the refrigerator, and created their own private celebration. They sat on the balcony, bathed in the soft glow of the city lights, gazing at the distant stars and weaving dreams for their future. Barry spoke with earnestness about his deep desire to provide for them, to create a haven of comfort and security for their family. Listening to his heartfelt words, Autumn felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. How incredibly fortunate she was to have found such a man. The initial months of their married life unfolded in a blissful haze of happiness and shared discoveries. They gently navigated the nuances of each other's habits, learning the art of compromise in small matters and standing firm on what truly mattered. Barry revealed a surprising domestic side. He possessed a repertoire of delicious recipes, willingly helped with household chores, and was remarkably tidy. Autumn deeply appreciated his meticulous nature and his attention to detail. They established a cherished tradition of Saturday breakfasts, waking up late, preparing something special, and savouring their meal at a leisurely pace, their conversation weaving through plans for the weekend. These Saturday mornings became their sacred time, moments when they could fully immerse themselves in each other's company, free from the hurried pace of the work week and the distractions of the outside world. And then, almost perceptibly at first, a subtle shift began to occur. It was like a hairline crack appearing on a flawless piece of glass, a fragile fissure that would gradually widen and deepen with time. Autumn noticed the first subtle changes around a year after their wedding. Barry began to arrive home later from work. New responsibilities, more demanding projects, he explained, his brow often furrowed with a weariness she hadn't seen before. Autumn, understanding the demands of his burgeoning career, didn't initially read too much into it, but then The cherished Saturday breakfasts began to fall by the wayside. An urgent meeting one week and important project the next. Then just a need to pop into the office for an hour. One Sunday morning, Autumn woke to find herself alone in their bed. The clock on the bedside table read 10 o'clock. Barry wasn't beside her, and she instinctively assumed he was preparing their usual leisurely breakfast. But the kitchen was empty. She found him in the living room, hunched over his laptop, his face illuminated by the screen, completely absorbed in his work. "Good morning," she said softly, approaching him and pressing a gentle kiss to the top of his head. "How long have you been up?" "Oh, hey," he mumbled, his eyes flicking up from the screen as if he didn't immediately register who was speaking to him. "Yeah, around 6. Couldn't sleep. Decided to get some work done." "On a Sunday?" Autumn couldn't quite conceal her surprise. "Something urgent?" "Just want to get ahead on this project," he replied, his attention already drifting back to the glowing screen. "Mr. Henderson will be pleased," Autumn said quietly, a slight ache in her chest. She took a breath and went to prepare breakfast. It felt unusual, a little lonely, but she tried to rationalize it, reminding herself that his career demanded sacrifices, and Barry had always been a dedicated and responsible worker. But gradually, these instances became the norm. Barry was increasingly delayed at work, their precious time together dwindling, and when they were together, he often seemed distant, lost in a world of his own thoughts. He began to forget the small significant details they used to cherish, their plans, the little things he once considered important. One day, Autumn gently reminded him of the anniversary of their relationship, 3 years since that company corporate where their story had begun. "Oh, right!" he exclaimed, slapping his forehead in a gesture of absent-mindedness. "I completely forgot. I'm so sorry, darling. I have a crucial presentation for investors today. Let's celebrate on the weekend, I promise." Autumn had agreed, though a subtle unease settled within her. He had never forgotten such dates before, and that wasn't the only change she had begun to notice. Besides, in the early days of their romance, Barry had always sought Autumn's input before making any significant decisions, valuing her perspective as an equal partner. But as time wore on, a subtle shift occurred. He began to present her with fait accompli, his plans already solidified. "I agreed we're going to my parents' for the weekend," he would announce, forgetting, or perhaps disregarding, their previously made plans to visit that intriguing art exhibition Autumn had been looking forward to. "We'll just have to reschedule," he'd say dismissively. "Family is more important." Or, "I invited Antonio and his wife over for Saturday. They need to feel welcomed into the fold." This would often clash with Autumn's own arrangements, a long-awaited reunion with her close friends. "You can see them another day," he'd suggest, his tone brooking no argument. "Antonio is a new colleague. Building these connections is important for my career." And with a sigh of resignation, Autumn would yield. Again and again, she tried to reassure herself that this was a temporary phase, a byproduct of Barry adjusting to his new responsibilities, the weight of his elevated position. "Everything will be fine soon," she'd whisper to herself, clinging to the hope that their easy companionship would return. But instead, the distance between them seemed to grow, an invisible chasm widening with each passing day. His moods became unpredictable, shifting as rapidly as the fickle October weather. One morning, He might shower her with affection and compliments, his eyes filled with warmth, but by evening a cold irritability would descend, and he would pick apart her words with a sharp, almost accusatory tone. "What's wrong, Barry?" she would ask, her voice laced with concern. "Is something bothering you at work?" "Nothing," he would reply curtly, his gaze averted. "Everything's fine." But his eyes, those warm brown eyes she had once found so captivating, now held a guarded, distant quality. April began to notice other unsettling habits. He checked his phone incessantly, and sometimes he would slip into another room to answer calls, his voice hushed. One afternoon, she had overheard him speaking in low, almost whispered tones in the bathroom. When she inquired who he had been talking to, he offered a dismissive explanation. "Just a colleague, work-related question." But the hushed intimacy in his voice had sounded anything but professional. A knot of anxiety began to tighten in Autumn's stomach, but she stubbornly pushed away the burgeoning suspicion. "Barry wouldn't deceive me," she told herself fiercely. "Not him. Not after everything we've shared." She tried to ignore these subtle yet persistent changes, to pretend that their life together was still the same, but beneath the surface a gnawing unease persisted. Before, Autumn had been a woman of confidence and energy, always taking care of herself, her appearance reflecting her inner vibrancy. Now she often found herself staring blankly into space, forgetting to brush her hair or apply makeup. She gravitated towards looser, more concealing clothes, as if trying to shrink away from the world. Her friends, with their intuitive senses, noticed the shift. "Autumn, what's wrong, my dear?" Alice had asked during a lunch break, her eyes filled with concern. "You seem so subdued lately. Are there problems at home?" "No, everything's fine," Autumn had replied, forcing a weak smile. "I'm just a little tired, lots of work," but it was a lie, a flimsy shield against their worried gazes. Work was as demanding as ever, but the real challenges lay within the walls of their home. Between Autumn and Barry, an invisible wall seemed to have risen, brick by silent brick. They shared the same apartment, slept in the same bed, yet they were drifting further and further apart, becoming strangers in their own lives. And then came Barry's second promotion, this time with Mr. Henderson's ascent to the position of Deputy General Director. Barry became the head of the entire design department. "Can you imagine, Autumn?" he had exclaimed, bursting through the door one evening, a bottle of expensive champagne held aloft like a trophy. "I have my own office now, an assistant, a separate budget for projects." That evening, for a fleeting few hours, he was the old Barry again, cheerful, open, loving. "I am so incredibly proud of you," Autumn had said, sincerely wrapping him in a tight embrace. And for a while, things seemed to settle. The sharp edges of Barry's irritability softened. He spent more time at home, and he once again began to show genuine interest in Autumn's day and her thoughts. Autumn had breathed a sigh of relief, convincing herself that the crisis had passed, that their love had weathered the storm. But it was then that the dream of a house by the sea, a dream Barry had first shared with her in the tender beginning of their relationship, became an almost obsessive fixation for him. "I've always dreamed of having my own place on the shore, remember?" he would say, often late in the evening, swirling his drink in his whiskey glass. "Now that I'm in a serious position, it's finally becoming a possibility. We just need to be patient, save up a little more money." Autumn nodded, a sense of foreboding she couldn't quite shake settling over her. Autumn vividly recalled the fervent gleam in Barry's eyes as he described his vision of the seaside house, built of light-coloured stone, boasting a sprawling terrace that embraced the endless horizon. He would paint pictures with his words, waking to the rhythmic symphony of the waves, sipping his morning coffee while gazing at the boundless blue expanse, finding inspiration for his work in the ever-changing seascape. "Can you just imagine how it will be, Autumn?" he would say, a dreamy expression softening his features. "You open your eyes, and there it is, the sea. You step out onto the terrace, and the salty breeze kisses your skin. You walk down a few steps, and in a minute you're already immersed in the cool embrace of the waves." "It sounds like paradise," Autumn would murmur, a touch of wistfulness in her voice. She had never experienced the sea firsthand. Life had somehow always steered her in other directions. Her childhood summers were spent in the tranquil countryside with her grandmother, a world away from crashing waves and sandy shores. In her student years, finances had been tight, and once her career had taken flight, it had consumed every spare moment. But listening to Barry's passionate descriptions, she had begun to conjure her own image of this idyllic house, this serene life by the sea. Gradually his dream had intertwined with her own, becoming a shared aspiration. They began to plan with an almost feverish enthusiasm. Barry immersed himself in real estate listings, meticulously studying different coastal areas, comparing prices and amenities. It soon became apparent that his dream was not just expensive, it was prohibitively so. "We need to earn more," he declared one evening, a determined set to his jaw. "I've been thinking about opening my own architectural practice. That requires significant startup capital." "Perhaps it's worth considering a loan?" Autumn suggested tentatively. "No," Barry replied firmly, shaking his head. "I don't want to start with the burden of debt. We need to build this ourselves, save up." And so he threw himself into his work with even greater intensity. He took on additional freelance projects, consulted private clients, spending his evenings and weekends hunched over intricate drawings and architectural models. Autumn, ever supportive, ensured their home remained a peaceful sanctuary, preparing nourishing dinners and refraining from voicing any complaints about his increasing absences. After some time, Barry's focus shifted slightly. "We should think about buying a new apartment," he announced one evening. "We need more space. Your apartment is lovely, Autumn, but it's not really suitable for a growing family. Do you want to have children?" Autumn asked, a hopeful flutter in her chest. "Not yet," he replied, his gaze distant. "First, we need to establish ourselves, secure our financial future. But in the future, of course," he added, a touch of reassurance in his tone. They began to explore their options, looking at larger apartments in more upscale neighbourhoods. Barry insisted on a prestigious location with a good view and at least 3 rooms. The prices were daunting, but he remained resolute. "This is an investment in our future, Autumn. It might be more expensive now, but we'll live comfortably." Eventually they found a spacious apartment in a newly constructed premium-class building, bright with expansive panoramic windows that overlooked a lush park. The initial down payment was substantial, and the remainder was tied to a 10-year mortgage. Autumn's salary and savings alone wouldn't have sufficed for such a significant purchase, but Barry had meticulously laid out the calculations, his confidence unwavering. "With my new position, we'll definitely be able to manage the payments, and then in a few years, when I open my own practice, our income will increase significantly." Autumn had agreed, though a small voice within her whispered a caution about taking on such a considerable financial burden. But Barry's enthusiasm was infectious, his conviction absolute, and she found herself unable to voice her reservations. They moved into the new apartment. It was undeniably spacious, with modern finishes, and offered a level of comfort they hadn't experienced in Autumn's older place. But with the increased square footage came new anxieties, hefty monthly mortgage payments, the expense of furnishing the larger space, and higher utility bills. Barry's work schedule intensified even further. He often stayed at the office until late into the night, sometimes not coming home at all, explaining his absence by saying he had fallen asleep at his desk. Autumn believed him. She desperately wanted to believe him, but his unwavering obsession with the house by the sea showed no signs of abating. Every evening he would be glued to his computer, scrolling through real estate websites, his eyes alight with longing. "Look at this beauty, Autumn," he would exclaim, showing her photographs of stunning villas perched on the coastline. "This is what I call living, not our struggling in these concrete jungles. Sometimes," his words stung. Struggling? They had just moved into a beautiful new apartment. They both had good jobs, a stable income. What struggling are you talking about? But she would remain silent, not wanting to dim the light of his dream. "I wish we could just win the lottery," he would sigh, closing yet another real estate website. "Then we could buy a house by the sea immediately, and we wouldn't have to wait for years." And Autumn would find herself thinking about her old apartment, the one they had never sold. Barry had suggested selling it to ease their mortgage burden, but Autumn had insisted on keeping it, a just-in-case scenario, as she had put it. In reality, it was her safety net, her quiet declaration of independence. Something deep within her had cautioned against letting it go. Now, the apartment stood empty, and sometimes Autumn would go there just to check if everything was all right. Within those familiar walls, she felt a sense of calm, as if she were stepping back into a simpler, more understandable chapter of her life. One evening, finding herself alone again as Barry's work kept him late, Autumn idly began to browse online real estate listings by the sea. She wasn't sure what prompted it, perhaps a desire to truly grasp the essence of his long-held dream, or simply a flicker of curiosity. She scrolled through images of pristine white villas, charming bungalows, and sleek modern cottages, trying to picture their life unfolding within those sun-drenched walls. Then she stumbled upon an advertisement that made her heart skip a beat. A cosy cottage on the first line by the sea. The description painted a vivid picture. 2 floors, 3 bedrooms, a spacious living room, bathed in light from panoramic windows. A fresh renovation, a terrace offering uninterrupted views of the azure sea, a meticulously tended garden, and even a private path leading directly to the beach. The accompanying photos were a breathtaking realization of everything Barry had ever described. A bright stone house nestled among fragrant pines and slender cypress trees, boasting a large wooden terrace adorned with inviting wicker chairs and a table. From the terrace, the endless expanse of the deep blue sea stretched out to meet the horizon. Inside, the rooms were airy and spacious, with whitewashed walls and warm wooden floors, furnished with a minimalist yet inviting style that emphasized light and space. The listed price caught her eye. Affordable. Not inexpensive, certainly, but significantly lower than most comparable properties in the area. The advertisement explained that the owner was compelled to sell urgently due to sudden family issues, which accounted for the surprisingly attractive price. Autumn saved the listing, her mind already racing with possibilities. What if? What if she actually bought this house? Could she orchestrate the ultimate surprise for Barry, making his lifelong dream a tangible reality? She still owned her old apartment. Selling it would provide a substantial portion of the funds. The remaining amount could perhaps be secured through a loan or a temporary arrangement with her parents. But the pragmatic side of her mind interjected, a voice of reason amidst the burgeoning excitement. They had just taken on a significant mortgage for their new apartment, the monthly payments a considerable drain on their finances. Taking on another loan seemed reckless, and was it wise to make such a monumental decision when their relationship felt fragile? Yet the image of that sun-drenched cottage by the sea, the embodiment of Barry's deepest yearning, refused to fade from her thoughts. She envisioned Barry's reaction, the return of the loving, attentive, happy man she had fallen in love with. Perhaps this beautiful place could be the catalyst for a new chapter in their lives, a fresh start by the whispering waves. The next day, Autumn contacted the realtor, whose details were listed in the ad, and arranged a viewing for the following weekend. She told Barry she was going to visit her childhood friend in another town, a casual explanation that he, engrossed in his demanding work, didn't even bother to question. The house, when she finally saw it in person, was even more enchanting than the photographs had suggested. The air was still and peaceful, the only sounds the soothing rhythm of the waves and the distant cries of seagulls. The scent of salt mingled with the crispness of pine and the delicate perfume of unfamiliar blossoms. Inside, the house was bathed in natural light, exuding a sense of tranquility and warmth. Smooth oak floors, pristine white walls, and comfortable furniture, crafted from natural wood, created an atmosphere of understated elegance. The first floor housed a spacious living room with a fireplace, a dining area, and a kitchen that seamlessly opened onto the captivating terrace. Upstairs, 3 bedrooms. The house was built about 5 years ago, explained the realtor, a tall, tanned man with kind eyes, who moved with the aid of a wheelchair. The owner is a Brazilian architect. He designed it himself, built it for his family. He paused, a touch of sadness in his voice. But now he has to return to his country. His mother is seriously ill and requires constant care. Autumn wandered through the rooms, her fingers trailing along the cool walls, gazing out of the sun-drenched windows. With each step, a growing conviction solidified within her. This was it. This was the house Barry had dreamed of. Their house. "I want to buy it," she said to the realtor, her voice firm, "but I need to sell my apartment to make the initial payment." "Of course," he nodded understandingly, "but please keep in mind there is a lot of interest in this property. I can't guarantee that the owner will wait for you indefinitely. How much time do you think you'll need?" 2 weeks maximum," Autumn replied, her mind already formulating a plan. She returned home that evening with a resolute determination to act swiftly. The very next day, she posted an advertisement for the sale of her old apartment. To her surprise, a buyer was found almost immediately, a young married couple who had been searching for a home in that particular area for quite some time. They were eager to make a deposit and prepared to finalize the full payment within a month. Everything seemed to be falling into place with remarkable ease. The proceeds from the sale of her apartment covered the half of the cost of the seaside cottage. Autumn decided to borrow the remaining sum from her parents. They had always diligently saved for a rainy day, and she knew they possessed the funds she needed. But when she went to her mother to discuss the loan, the conversation took an unexpected turn. The moment Autumn walked through the door, her mother's usually serene face was etched with worry. "Autumn, my dear, what is it? You've lost weight, and there are dark circles under your eyes. Are you all right?" "Yes, Mum, everything's fine," Autumn reassured her, offering a weak smile. Autumn attempted a reassuring smile, but it felt brittle and unconvincing even to herself. They sat in the familiar warmth of her childhood kitchen, the comforting aroma of her mother's apple pie filling the air. The familiar surroundings, the evocative sense of her past, her mother's unwavering, concerned gaze. it all stirred a wave of emotions within Autumn, feelings she had been diligently suppressing for years. "Mum," Autumn began, choosing her words carefully, "I want to buy a house." She paused, taking a breath. "By the sea, for Barry and me." "A house by the sea?" Her mother's eyebrows arched in surprise. "But you've just taken out a mortgage for the apartment. And besides, why would you need a house so far from the city, from your work?" "It's Barry's dream, Mum," Autumn explained, a wistful tone creeping into her voice. "It's been his long-held dream." "And so you've decided to plunge yourself into more debt?" Her mother shook her head slowly, a hint of disapproval in her eyes. "Autumn, this isn't like you. You've always been so sensible." Autumn then described the charming cottage she had found, how perfectly it mirrored Barry's detailed description, the life she had begun to imagine for them there, the sound of the waves, the salty air, the endless blue horizon. "I've sold my old apartment," she added, her voice a little too bright. "I have half of the amount." She finally broached the reason for her visit. "I wanted to ask if you and Dad could lend me the remaining amount." Her mother listened intently, but Autumn could see that her enthusiasm wasn't contagious. "Autumn, tell me honestly," her mother said, reaching across the table to take her hand, her gaze piercing. "Are you and Barry all right?" The simple question seemed to pierce the carefully constructed dam Autumn had built around her emotions. Suddenly, her eyes welled up, her throat tightening with unshed tears. "I don't know, Mum," she whispered, her voice trembling. "He's changed so much. He's become cold, distant, constantly at work, always busy, and when he is home, he looks right through me, as if I'm not even there." And then the carefully guarded anxieties spilled forth, the strange, hushed phone calls, the increasingly late returns from work, the sharp, inexplicable shifts in his moods, the nagging suspicions that had been stealing her peace. I thought if I fulfilled his dream," her voice broke, "that he would go back to being the way he was before." Her mother listened in silence, her grip on Autumn's hand tightening reassuringly. When Autumn finally finished, her breath catching in a sob, her mother took a deep, steadying breath. "My dear girl," she said softly, her eyes filled with a profound sadness. "Can't you see what's happening? He's being unfaithful to you." "Mum!" Autumn protested, a wave of disbelief washing over her. "There's no need to close your eyes to the obvious, Autumn. All the signs are there. Late nights, secret calls, mood swings. It's a classic pattern." "But this is Barry," Autumn insisted, her voice laced with a desperate plea for reassurance. "He's not like that." "He's a man, Autumn. And now, at the peak of his career, he feels important, successful. In such moments, many men begin to seek validation of that importance elsewhere. Believe my experience, my dear, and listen to my advice. Don't rush into buying this house. First, you need to understand what's happening in your relationship." "But someone else might buy the house," Autumn argued. "There will be another, meant to you." They talked for a long time, her mother gently urging caution, advising her not to make any hasty decisions, especially financial ones. "If you still decide to buy this house," she said finally, her gaze serious, "register it in your name, or even better, in mine. That way, in the event of a divorce, he won't automatically get half." "Mum, what are you talking about? What divorce?" Autumn exclaimed, shocked by her mother's stark words. "Just be careful, Autumn," her mother said, kissing her forehead. "I don't wish you any harm, but I also don't want to see you left with nothing." Autumn left her mother's house in a state of turmoil. The seed of doubt her mother had planted, the possibility of Barry's betrayal, took root and began to grow, casting a long shadow over her hopes. Could it be true? Could the man she had believed to be the epitome of honesty and integrity be capable of such deceit? On the drive home, a decision formed in Autumn's mind. She would buy the house, but she would register it in her mother's name. Not because she didn't trust Barry entirely, but as a form of insurance, a safeguard against the unsettling possibility her mother had raised. If everything is fine, she reasoned, what difference does it make whose name is on the deed? But if Mum is right, I won't lose everything I have. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of activity, filled with the complicated logistics of purchasing the house and handling the necessary paperwork. She finalised the sale of her apartment, met with a lawyer to arrange the registration of the new property, and negotiated the final details with the owner through the patient realtor. Barry, lost in the demanding world of his projects, barely seemed to notice her preoccupation, returning home late each night, shrouded in his own world of deadlines and designs. The sale of Autumn's apartment was successful. The funds were transferred to a separate account, specifically opened for the purchase of the seaside cottage. Her mother, after much heartfelt deliberation, agreed to provide the remaining amount and allowed Autumn to register the house in her name. "But keep in mind, Autumn," her mother had said, her eyes filled with a mixture of concern and resolve, "if your suspicions prove unfounded, we will immediately re-register the house in both your names. I don't want to be the cause of distrust in your family." Autumn had readily agreed, her heart heavy with a mixture of hope and apprehension. Deep within Autumn, a fragile hope had flickered. She yearned to be wrong about her suspicions, to believe that Barry's heart remained true, that their love would endure. She dreamed that the seaside cottage would become a shared haven of happiness, not a battleground of resentment. The purchase of the house took place on a bright, promising May morning. Autumn and her mother, accompanied by the lawyer, arrived at the notary's office. The realtor and the previous owner, a kind-faced, grey-haired Brazilian gentleman, were already waiting. "You are making a wonderful purchase. This house, it is full of happiness," he said to Autumn, a warm smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. "I hope you will be very happy in it." They completed the necessary paperwork. Autumn transferred the funds and the man handed over the keys. The house, now legally, belonged to Autumn's mother, and Autumn could move in whenever she chose. They had agreed that if the need arose, her mother would readily re-register the property in Autumn's name, but for now it would remain as it was. On the drive home, Autumn was overwhelmed by a torrent of conflicting emotions. On one hand, she had fulfilled Barry's cherished dream. They now possessed a house by the sea. On the other hand, she had done it in secret, without his knowledge or input. And furthermore, the house wasn't even registered in their names, but in her mother's. It felt like a fundamental dishonesty, but she resolved to tell him the truth when the moment felt right. She would explain that she had wanted to surprise him, hence the secrecy, and they would address the issue of registration later, once everything else was resolved. Autumn could barely contain her anticipation for the moment she would see his face, the moment she would reveal her extraordinary gift. She imagined his utter surprise, his unrestrained joy, his heartfelt gratitude. Perhaps this grand gesture would mend the fragile threads of their connection, bringing back the closeness, the trust, the love that had seemed to slip away. Returning to their apartment, however, Autumn found it empty. A wave of disappointment washed over her. Another late night at work. She sighed, trying to quell the rising tide of loneliness. She decided to wait for him, busying herself by preparing a comforting dinner, setting their table with care, and even purchasing a bottle of his favourite wine. But Barry didn't come home to his wife that evening. Autumn tried calling him, but his phone was switched off. Finally, exhausted and disheartened, she went to bed alone, leaving the untouched dinner on the table. She was eventually awakened by the soft click of the front door opening. It was well past midnight. Barry had finally returned. She heard him move quietly through the apartment, the sound of the bathroom tap running briefly. Then he emerged and went to the kitchen, the gentle hum of the refrigerator door opening and closing reaching her ears. Autumn lay with her eyes closed, feigning sleep, listening to these familiar sounds that now held a strange, unsettling quality. Finally he came to their bedroom, carefully sliding into bed beside her, trying not to disturb her. He smelled of fresh shampoo, toothpaste, and mint chewing gum, the familiar scents of his nightly routine. But beneath these, Autumn detected another, more subtle aroma, a floral, distinctly feminine perfume. A sharp pain pierced her heart. So, her mother had been right. Barry was being unfaithful. And on this very day, when Autumn had been orchestrating the fulfillment of his dream, he had been with another woman. She didn't betray her awakening, didn't erupt into accusations, or demand an immediate explanation. First, she needed to be certain. She needed to uncover the full extent of his betrayal, to understand the depth of his feelings for this other person, before making any irrevocable decisions. The following morning, Barry was unusually cheerful and attentive. He prepared breakfast, brewed her coffee just the way she liked it, and placed a light kiss on her cheek before heading out the door to work. It was as if nothing had changed, as if the subtle scent of another woman hadn't lingered in the air between them. "I'll be late tonight, sweetheart," he said, his hand on the doorknob. "Important meeting with investors." "Okay," Autumn replied, forcing a smile that felt brittle on her lips, feeling the icy grip of pain and disappointment tighten within her. "Honey, I have some news for you too. I bought a cottage by the sea." Barry's reaction was everything she had hoped for. He was ecstatic, showering her with kisses and enthusiastic hugs before finally rushing off to work. All day, Autumn wrestled with the implications of her discovery and the unexpected turn of events. Now she was profoundly grateful that she had registered the house in her mother's name, that she had kept this insignificant secret. Perhaps, she thought with a heavy heart, she would have to embark on a new life, not with Barry, but in her solitary cottage by the sea. When Autumn returned from her own workday, an unusual silence greeted her in their apartment. Usually, Barry would have music playing if he had arrived home before her, but now the air was still and heavy. On the table, an envelope lay addressed to her, her name written in his familiar handwriting. With trembling hands, Autumn opened it and unfolded the several sheets of paper inside. The first was a short, stark note from Barry. "Autumn, we need to talk. I've wanted to tell you this for a long time, but I couldn't find the right moment. Our marriage was a mistake. We are too different. We have different goals, different ideas about life. I've filed for divorce. Documents inside. Sorry." The following pages were indeed legal documents, an application for divorce and a proposal for the division of their property. And there, in black and white, was Barry's demand. Half of the new cottage by the sea. Autumn sank heavily onto a nearby chair, a chilling sensation spreading through her, as if the very ground beneath her feet was dissolving. Divorce, division of property, all the gnawing doubts, the unsettling suspicions, had not only been confirmed, but were far more advanced than she had imagined. Barry had already made his decision, coldly prepared the legal documents without so much as an attempt to communicate, to explore the possibility of salvaging what they had once shared. Tears streamed down her face, but they weren't solely tears of despair. There was a strange sense of release in them, a cleansing. It was as if all the tension, all the accumulated pain of the past few months was being washed away with each silent drop. I sold my apartment and bought a cottage by the sea as my beloved husband dreamed. The cruel irony of it twisted in her gut. On that very day, the day his dream materialized, her husband had presented her with the stark reality of their ending. But amidst the shock and the hurt, something else stirred within Autumn, a flicker of strength, a sense of grounding. The house, her house by the sea, a sanctuary, a place where she could begin to rebuild, to tend to her wounded heart, to discover a new purpose. With a newfound resolve, she rose, wiped the dampness from her cheeks, and began to pack her belongings. Only the essentials mattered now, a few changes of clothes, her important documents, a handful of cherished mementos. The rest, the new furniture they had painstakingly chosen, the expensive appliances, the carefully curated decor, could remain with him. She needed to start anew, with a clean slate. As she folded her clothes into the suitcase, she reached for her phone and called her mother. "Mum, I'm going to our new house." A note of alarm tightened her mother's voice. "What happened, Autumn?" "You were right, Mum," Autumn said, her voice surprisingly steady. "Barry filed for divorce, left the papers and disappeared." A choked sob escaped her mother. "Oh dear, I'm so sorry." "Don't be, Mum," Autumn replied, a strange sense of clarity washing over her. "It's almost better this way. Now I know for sure that there was nothing left to save, and I am so grateful to fate that we managed to secure the house for you. Do you want me to come to you?" her mother offered immediately. "No, Mum. I need to be alone for a while, to sort things out within me, within my life. But thank you for the offer." Having packed her meagre belongings, Autumn called a taxi and took one last lingering look around the apartment that had so recently felt like their ideal home. Now it felt alien, cold, impersonal. She felt no pang of regret as she closed the door behind her. The journey to the new house was long. As the taxi sped along the night highway, the passing headlights cast fleeting illuminations on her face, and she gazed out at the darkness, contemplating the bewildering nature of life. That morning, she had dreamt of a shared future with Barry in that very house. Now she was travelling there alone, her heart aching, yet with an unexpected undercurrent of liberation. She arrived late, the quiet of the unfamiliar village pressing in around her. The driver helped her unload her suitcases, and, after receiving his fare, departed, leaving her standing alone on the silent street before her new refuge. She stood before the cottage, now her sanctuary, a complex tapestry of emotions swirling within her, the bitter taste of her shattered marriage mingling with a fragile hope for a new beginning. Opening the door, she stepped inside. The house was empty and still, yet it didn't feel unwelcoming. The windows faced the dark expanse of the sea, and even in the inky blackness she could discern its soft rhythmic whisper. She flicked on the lights, left her suitcases in the hall, and made her way to the terrace. A full moon hung low on the horizon, casting a silvery glow across the dark water. The night breeze rustled through unseen curtains, carrying the distinct sense of salt. Autumn inhaled deeply, feeling a knot of tension within her begin to loosen, to unwind. In this place she could simply be. She could tend to her wounds. She could find her footing once more. That night she slept on the sofa in the living room, wrapped in a soft blanket she found tucked away in a closet. She awoke to the bright, unfiltered sunlight streaming through the uncurtained windows. Birds sang a cheerful chorus outside, and the sea murmured its constant invitation to begin a new day. She unpacked her suitcases, arranging her few possessions in the spaces, and made a mental list of the essentials she would need to make the house a home. On her drive in, she had noticed a small general store in the village, and she decided to start there. The day passed in a flurry of activity, buying groceries, fresh linens, basic kitchenware. As evening approached, Autumn sat on the terrace with a steaming mug of tea, watching the sun melt into the horizon in a blaze of fiery hues. She had turned off her phone the previous day and had no intention of turning it back on any time soon. Let the outside world wait. She needed this respite, this precious time alone with herself. The following days unfolded in a similar rhythm. A measured, calming routine. She awoke early with the first blush of dawn, had a simple breakfast on the terrace overlooking the ever-present sea, and allowed the quiet beauty of her surroundings to seep into her soul. Then followed a period of quiet healing. Autumn spent her days walking along the deserted beach, letting the cool waves wash over her feet, searching for the perfect seashells that whispered tales of the ocean's depths. She basked in the warmth of the sun, allowing its golden rays to soothe her weary soul. In the afternoons, she busied herself within the cottage, unpacking her new belongings, making lists of the furniture she would need to acquire, and envisioning the transformation of the empty rooms into a welcoming home. Evenings were spent on the terrace, lost in the pages of books she had always longed to read, but never found the time for, the melodies of her favourite music filling the air, her gaze drifting towards the countless stars that blanketed the night sky. Gradually, the sharp edges of her pain began to soften. Thoughts of Barry, their fractured marriage, his betrayal, became less frequent, less insistent. More and more, she found her mind drifting towards the future, towards the possibilities that lay before her in this new chapter. She envisioned how she would cultivate the wild garden, the type of work she might find in the nearby town, the kind of life she could build for herself here by the sea. After a week of her solitude, a sense of readiness stirred within her. It was time to reconnect, to step back into the flow of reality. She switched on her phone and was immediately bombarded by a flurry of notifications. Several messages were from her mother, filled with worry and affection. Autumn promptly called her, reassuring her she was all right, that she had simply needed a pause to gather her thoughts and find her equilibrium. Then came the calls and messages from Barry. Dozens of missed calls, angry texts demanding her whereabouts, insisting she answer immediately. The last message sent just yesterday chilled her to the bone. "I know where you are. Wait for me." A cold dread washed over Autumn. How could he possibly know? She had told no one the address except her mother. Surely her mother wouldn't have betrayed her confidence. Perhaps he was just bluffing, trying to intimidate her. But a deep intuition told her otherwise. He had somehow managed to track her down, to discover her sanctuary, and now he was coming here. Why? What could he possibly want? He was the one who had filed for divorce, the one who had so decisively ended their marriage. A restless day followed, Autumn constantly glancing at the winding road that led to the cottage. By evening, her nerves were frayed, stretched to their breaking point. She poured herself a glass of wine, hoping it would offer a small measure of solace. She sat on the terrace, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple, desperately trying to convince herself that everything would be all right, that she would find the strength to navigate this new confrontation. And then she heard the unmistakable sound of a car approaching. The crunch of tyres on the gravel path grew louder, followed by a sharp knock on the front door. Autumn took a deep, steadying breath and turned towards the entrance of the terrace. Barry stood there, tanned and toned, impeccably dressed in a crisp white shirt and light linen trousers. His hair was neatly styled, his beard was trimmed perfectly. He looked flawless, as he had constantly strived to look lately. Only his eyes were different, cold, calculating, devoid of the warmth she had once known. "And I was wondering where you had disappeared to," he demanded, his voice devoid of any greeting. Autumn replied calmly, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "Hello, Barry. How did you find me? The browser's history? The saved address? It wasn't difficult to guess," he said with a thin, almost predatory smile. Foolish, April thought with a pang of self-reproach. I should have been more careful. But aloud she said, trying to protect an air of firmness she didn't entirely feel, "What do you want, Barry? You're the one who filed for divorce, who left those papers and vanished. What else is there to discuss?" He stepped onto the terrace, his gaze sweeping over the tranquil setting. He let out a low whistle. "Not bad. A view of the sea, fresh air. And here I thought you'd be worried, suffering." "I was worried. I suffered. But then I decided you weren't worth my tears." "Oh, how brave we've become," he sneered, stepping closer, his shadow falling over her. "Now listen to me carefully, Autumn. I've filed for property division, and I will get this house. So pack your things and get out. I'll be back in a week when I've finalised all the formalities." Autumn stared at him, disbelief warring with a rising tide of anger. This man, whom she had once loved with all her heart, for whom she had vowed to spend her life, was now a complete stranger. Cold, calculating, cruel. "Why do you think this house is joint property?" she asked, her voice low but trembling with indignation. "It was bought during our marriage, and according to the law, half is mine," he said, a condescending smirk playing on his lips. Autumn stood up, wanting to meet his gaze directly, refusing to be looked down upon any longer. "You," she said quietly, but with a steely resolve, "you are a scoundrel, the likes of which I have never seen. I supported you throughout our entire marriage, believed in you when no one else did, and this is how you repay me?" "Don't make it personal, Autumn," he said dismissively. "This is your own fault for being so foolish." "You're right," Autumn said, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "I was stupid. Stupid that I ever said yes to you. But did you really think I didn't know about the other woman?" Her voice dripped with sarcasm. "Anyway, I'm not a complete fool, Barry. I took precautions," Autumn stated, her voice calm despite the tremor that ran through her. "What other measures?" Barry's tone sharpened, a vein throbbing in his neck. "This house," she gestured around the terrace, a subtle defiance in her movement, "was bought with the money from the sale of my premarital apartment, and I have all the documents to prove it." Barry blinked, momentarily taken aback, but quickly regained his composure. "No matter, the court will sort it out. If the house was bought during the marriage—" "The house isn't registered in my name, Barry," Autumn interrupted, her voice clear and steady. "It belongs to my mother. I simply live here, so don't think for a moment you can just take it. And of course there will be a division," she continued, a hint of steel in her tone. "We will share the apartment and the mortgage that comes with it. I invested no less in it than you did." "Oh, you're a viper," he hissed, his fist slamming into the door jamb inches from her face. Autumn recoiled slightly, but felt no fear, only a profound indifference towards this man who had once been her ideal. "By the way," she said, her voice dangerously soft, "there are security cameras all around the perimeter." It was a bluff, a desperate gamble, but she hoped it would land. "I'll be sure to show this little manoeuvre of yours in court. You'll be paying me compensation for emotional distress." Barry's face contorted in fury, but he hesitated, stepping back slightly. "You're bluffing." "Feel free to check," Autumn replied, shrugging with an indifference she didn't entirely feel. He scanned the terrace, the house, the garden, his eyes darting around as if searching for unseen lenses. Then he clenched his fists, his jaw tight. "We'll see who ends up with this house," he spat through gritted teeth. "We already have," Autumn said, a small genuine smile finally gracing her lips. "It's mine, or rather my mother's. And now, please leave. This is private property, and you are an unwelcome guest here." Barry glared at her, his eyes burning with hatred, before finally turning on his heel and stalking towards his car. Autumn heard the sharp roar of the engine as he started it, the tyres spitting gravel as he sped away, taking his anger and his demands with him, away from her home, away from her new life. She exhaled, a wave of relief washing over her. She had faced him, met his anger head on, and she hadn't broken, hadn't succumbed to his threats or manipulation. She had protected her sanctuary, her future. The divorce proceedings were far less agonizing than Autumn had anticipated. Barry hired a sharp lawyer, and Autumn, in turn, sought her own legal counsel. They didn't see each other again until the final court hearing, their communication mediated through their representatives. Barry aggressively pursued his claim that the seaside cottage was joint property, but the court swiftly rejected his demands. Autumn's lawyer presented a clear and irrefutable case, proving that the house had been purchased with funds solely from the sale of Autumn's premarital apartment, and that it was legally registered in her mother's name, not hers. Yes, their new apartment went to Barry, but now, according to the court's decision, he was obliged to pay the mortgage for it himself, as well as reimburse Autumn for half of the amount already paid for it, and for repairs, furniture, and household appliances. At the final hearing, as the judge delivered the verdict, Autumn saw Barry crumple some papers in his hands, his face a mask of frustrated rage. He finally understood that his calculated plan to seize the seaside cottage had failed spectacularly. "Don't be discouraged, Barry," Autumn said quietly as she passed him after the hearing, a hint of bittersweet irony in her tone. "But now you are free. He shot her a venomous look, but remained silent. It was the last time Autumn ever saw him, and she felt nothing but a profound sense of relief that this chapter of her life had finally closed. After the divorce was finalised, Autumn made the permanent move to her house by the sea. She resigned from her demanding job, deciding to embrace a sabbatical, a pause in her career to truly explore what she desired for her future. Her savings provided a comfortable cushion, allowing her the luxury of not rushing into a new position. Slowly, lovingly, she began to furnish the cottage, imbuing it with her own personal style. She painted the bedroom walls a soft pink, a colour she had always adored, but that Barry had deemed too feminine. She arranged the living room to her liking, with comfortable armchairs, perfect for reading, overflowing bookshelves, and a large inviting table, ideal for writing and creative projects. In the garden, she planted roses and calming lilies and a few olive trees. She cultivated a small vegetable patch, nurturing herbs and fresh produce for her own table. On weekends, she enjoyed visiting the local market, a vibrant hub of community, where she purchased sun-ripened fruits, homemade cheeses, and golden olive oil pressed by local farmers. The house by the sea was no longer just a refuge. It was blossoming into a home, filled with the promise of a new and independent life. Autumn gradually formed connections with the neighbours, the other homeowners nestled by the sea. Many were retirees or individuals working remotely, cherishing the tranquility and unassuming rhythm of coastal life. A few months drifted by, and Autumn began to work again, offering remote consultations to companies on sales strategies and assisting with the launch of fresh projects. Her established reputation and wealth of experience in the industry ensured a steady stream of clients. A year after the finalization of her divorce, Autumn's mother gently but firmly insisted on transferring the house into her name. "This is your sanctuary, your home, Autumn," she had declared, "and it should rightfully belong to you." Her mother's hand trembled slightly as she signed the notary documents. "You deserve this, my dear, and I am so proud of you." That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of rose and molten gold, they sat together on the terrace, the clinking of champagne flutes punctuating the quiet celebration of this new chapter. "You know," Autumn mused, her gaze drifting over the sea, mirroring the vibrant sunset, "I never imagined I could find such contentment on my own." She had always envisioned herself as part of a pair, a family unit, but now within the walls of her own home, surrounded by her own thoughts and the sweet taste of freedom, she understood a different kind of happiness. Her mother smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners, and squeezed Autumn's hand. "You'll meet someone again, someone who will truly appreciate the remarkable woman you are," she said with a knowing glance. "But even if that doesn't happen, you will still live a full and joyful life, because you, my dear, have learned the invaluable art of being happy within yourself." Autumn knew her mother spoke the truth. She had painstakingly learned to value her own worth, to acknowledge her desires, and to nurture her dreams. She had cultivated the ability to listen to the quiet wisdom of her intuition and to trust the whispers of her own heart. She had learned to build her life according to her own blueprint, not someone else's. Sometimes, especially on those balmy summer evenings when she sat on the terrace, a glass of crisp white wine in hand, gazing at the endless expanse of the sea, thoughts of Barry would surface, not with the sharp sting of pain or the lingering taste of bitterness, but with a gentle wave of sadness, and surprisingly, a seed of gratitude. Gratitude for the profound lesson he had unknowingly imparted. The vital importance of staying true to oneself, of heeding that inner voice, and of not fearing the blank canvas of a new beginning. In those reflective moments, Autumn would raise her glass in a silent toast. To new beginnings, she'd whisper to the whispering waves, and the sea, as if in understanding, would murmur back a comforting sound that spoke of boundless possibilities waiting just beyond the horizon. And then she would turn back to her house, her sanctuary by the sea, the place where her strength resided, and a deep sense of certainty would settle within her. Whatever trials fate might lay in her path, she knew she would face them with resilience. She had already navigated the treacherous waters of a beloved's betrayal, the shattering of cherished hopes and dreams. And she had not merely survived, she had emerged stronger, wiser, and with a new-found sense of inner peace. Each morning, as the gentle rhythm of the waves greeted her, Autumn would offer a silent thank you for this house by the sea, for this fresh start, for the precious opportunity to rebuild, and for the inner fortitude she had discovered within herself to take that decisive step. Selling the old apartment, purchasing this coastal haven, and securing her future by registering it in her mother's name. One sun-drenched afternoon, as Autumn strolled along the familiar stretch of sandy beach, a flash of golden fur caught her eye. A playful golden retriever, tail wagging with unrestrained joy, bounded towards her, a slobbery tennis ball clutched in its mouth. Close behind followed his owner, a man with kind eyes and hands dusted with what looked like paint. He had an air of quiet contemplation about him, as if constantly observing the world through an artistic lens. "Oh, excuse me," he called out, a warm smile gracing his lips as he approached. "Barnaby sometimes forgets his manners." Autumn chuckled, bending down to ruffle the dog's soft ears. "He's full of life," she replied, her gaze lifting to meet the man's. "It's lovely to see." He introduced himself as Julian, explaining that he was an artist, seeking inspiration and tranquility by the sea for a few weeks. They discovered a shared appreciation for the rhythmic crash of the waves and the ever-changing canvas of the ocean. After that initial meeting, their paths began to cross more frequently. Autumn would see Julian sketching on the rocks, his brow furrowed in concentration, Barnaby patiently lying by his side. They would pause for brief conversations, sharing observations about the local bird life or the way the light danced on the water. Autumn found herself looking forward to these casual encounters. Julian possessed a gentle curiosity and a way of seeing the world that was both refreshing and inspiring. He spoke of colours and light in a way that made her notice the subtle beauty she had perhaps taken for granted. He, in turn, seemed drawn to Autumn's quiet strength and the warmth in her eyes. Their conversations unfolded naturally, moving from the superficial to deeper reflections on life, art, and the unexpected turns that fate sometimes takes. They discovered shared passions beyond the sea, a love for old films, a similar dry wit, and a deep appreciation for quiet evenings. Julian would show Autumn his sketches, the lines on paper capturing the raw beauty of the coastline, and he would listen intently as she spoke of her work and the sense of peace she had finally found in her life by the sea. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of fiery orange and soft lavender, Julian turned to Autumn, his gaze earnest. "Autumn," he began, his voice gentle, "I've truly enjoyed our time together. Would you consider having dinner with me? not just as two people who happened to walk their dogs on the same beach, but as something more. A warmth spread through Autumn's chest. She met his gaze, a soft smile gracing her lips. "I would like that very much, Julian." Their first dinner was filled with easy laughter and the comfortable feeling of two souls recognizing a kindred spirit. As the days turned into months, their connection deepened, blossoming into a tender and supportive love. And most importantly, their hearts full and content, living a life woven with love, laughter, and the enduring peace of the sea.